Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. I love stories when people say they know the owners and will complain about an employee, and suddenly the OP says, "Hey, me too. I'm reporting you. We know the owner." So this happened last weekend, and I'm still laughing a bit. I work second shift at a waffle-type breakfast place. I was on third shift, but we shut down after the only other server quit, and we had to call the cops too many times. So the basic rules of any establishment is first come, first serve. We have a set of rules, 10s, 5s, and 7s. One of our rules is hot food first, which, duh. So I'm the only waitress. I got people at almost every booth in this place. I'm calling table 1's food when someone I used to work with comes in with her fiance and son. They sit at booth 11. So as I'm getting their drink orders, a couple in their late 40s come in and sit at the booth behind them. Table 1 had their food come up right as I went to make the drinks. I obviously carry my hot food out, make sure they're all set and everything looks good, then I make the drinks. She's ready to order, so I take their order, call it in, then go to table 12. She's already huffy because I guess I didn't rush to her table fast enough. Her husband was busy moving their bikes from Texas Roadhouse parking lot to our parking lot. Now, since third shift is closed, they don't make me make the tea. So if we run out, then we're out. I could make the tea, but on average, about 2 people will ask for this during my shift, so I'd essentially use maybe 1/3 of the sweet tea, if that. So I don't make it since it's a waste. This lady asked for a sweet tea, and I explained to her that we're out. I don't even get to offer anything else before she gets mad and goes, "We're leaving. Let's go." This is the South, so I do what every good Southern soul does, and I tell them to have a good day and walk away. I guess she wasn't expecting me not to offer to make a whole thing of sweet tea or something. It's like 6:30 and we're going to lock the doors in an hour and a half. I'm not making sweet tea. She was the first person to ask for it that day. She proceeds to tell me that she's reporting me, so I tell her, "That's fine," with a polite smile. My favorite part was when she goes, "I know them." Okay, really well. Ma'am, everyone that works at the House of Waffles in this part of the state, and a few in the state next over, all know the owner. He visits every store for major holidays and does pop-in visits. This man knows every single one of us. I've worked for him for 6 years. But please report me. Be sure to tell him I was taking out my hot food and I was taking care of the table that came in before you. I love when other people tell my job that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I went ahead and told my manager, and she laughed and said, "Okay." It's not scandalous or dramatic, but it did cause me to laugh. And our second story. Don't like something that doesn't affect you? Then don't try and change it. This jolly little tale takes us back to the summer of 2008. But first, a little background to set the story. When my grandmother passed away, she left my dad her house, a small little single-floor place in a small community in a fairly rural area along the Potomac River. I spent many summers here fishing and engaging in other fun water-related activities while making friends with the kids of the houses across the street. Being a bit of a river community, there was a private beach, a pier for HOA members. You'd get a lot of people who bought a house for the weekends with the intent to retire there. The primary parties involved here are 1. House of OP, my parents and I. 2. House of Mr. Jack, our neighbors across the street. 3. House of Mr. Smith, longtime friends of Mr. Jack. 4. House of Paul, the family behind Mr. Jack. 5. Grumpy old people, housed directly to the west of Mr. Jack. Many years before the incident, as all members of the houses got along, interacted, kids played, etc., Mr. Smith and Mr. Jack got to talking. You see, Mr. Smith had a small Class C RV, not too big, about 20 feet-ish. And wouldn't it be cool to bring that up and keep it on Mr. Jack's property to function as extra sleeping space, etc. on all these fun weekends? The next weekend, the RV's brought up, parked in Mr. Jack's side yard parallel to the street on the east side of the house. All goes well for several years until the spring of 2008. You see, the grumpy old people had decided they were going to spend more time at their river house, where they used to come down every couple of months and hide out in their home. They're now coming down every weekend trying to be social and having friends and family with them. The RV, however, was apparently making this impossible. Never mind the fact that they couldn't actually see it as it was completely hidden by Mr. Jack's house. So grumpy people came up with a plan. They complained to the community HOA several times, enough that the HOA feels they should get involved. So HOA starts pestering Mr. Jack to have the RV removed. Mr. Jack says, LOL, no, because the HOA rules and regs have nothing in them about keeping RVs on property, etc. HOA has no leg to stand on in this situation. They have to tell grumpy old people, too bad, so sad, better luck next time. Grumpy old people decided that this isn't good enough, so if the HOA doesn't have a rule or regulation that helps, they'll create one. At the next board meeting, a motion is created and gains some support. Grumpy old people, however, goes beyond the RV and are now wanting to include other things as well. Tractors, boats, decrepit outbuildings. They very quickly lose support as this would now cause problems with a lot of the current HOA members and board members. The motion falls on its face. You would think this was the end of it, but no, grumpy old people just couldn't let such an injustice go. So after licking their wounds from the failed motion to change the HOA bylaws, they make an anonymous tip to the county about some nonsense about people living inside an RV. Keep in mind that our family, Mr. Jack, Mr. Smith, and Paul, are all weekenders and don't actually live there. One sunny afternoon, while Mr. Jack and his wife are outside doing a little yard work, an official county person stops by to investigate the claims of people living full-time in an RV. This is very quickly discovered to be not true, and the county official goes on their merry way. But the complaints keep coming in. County officials keep having to come out. This goes on for a few months. Mr. Jack and Mr. Smith are beyond annoyed. Our family and Paul are irritated. Our families talk to many of the surrounding neighbors. We have long ties to the community and know many of them very well and are on very good terms. We ask around and from the grapevine learn that it's grumpy old people that have been filing all the complaints. In fact, there's a rumor floating around that one of the reasons grumpy old people is doing this is because they wanted to buy Mr. Jack's property before Mr. Jack did and are bitter they were not able to. There's a lot of back and forth with the county government people. While no one actually lives in the RV, people do occasionally stay in it on weekends. After a few months, the county decides this is okay, but the RV will have to be moved. Its current location on the property puts it in direct line of sight of the street, so it needs to move behind the house. Mr. Jack and Mr. Smith are fine with this because it turns out that Mr. Smith was planning on selling the little RV in order to buy a larger one that they would eventually travel around the country in after they retired. So the little RV gets driven off on a nice Sunday and grumpy old people are ecstatic. They think they've won. Imagine their surprise the next weekend when a big honking fifth wheel gets parked exactly where the county said it could be parked, in the back of Mr. Jack's property, in clear view of the nice screened-in patio the grumpy old people just finished building. Don't like knowing a small RV's on your neighbor's property out of your sight? Tough, because all that complaining means you and your wife get to stare at it every time you drag your self-centered butts outside. And our next story. But you told me to go ring out customers. I recently picked up a second job at a grocery store to give me some extra cash, because I love my main job, but it doesn't pay well. At this grocery store, my official job is checking the shelves and putting in orders for things that are low or sold out. I'm still in training right now and will be for another 2 weeks, at which point I'll be taking over for someone going on maternity leave and will be working her job for the next 6 months. Now, at this particular grocery store, every employee is trained in how to run a cash register. The reason for this is that the store likes to employ the bare minimum of cashiers, and if there's a rush of customers waiting to check out, they'll call other people, stockers mostly, but other positions too, to help check customers out during those rushes. Meaning people have to drop whatever work they're doing and go up front to ring out customers if they're called. Because of my job, I'm considered second call, meaning I don't go up for general calls if cashiers come to the front. They have to call me by name or job title specifically. This is important for this story. About a week ago, I was doing some training with the lady I'm going to be filling in for. That particular day, she was teaching me a rather important part of the job, canceling automatic weekly orders for that week if for whatever reason we have way more of that product than we should have. But also on that day, I kept getting called to the front by name to go ring customers out. This meant that my training was going slower than expected, which is a problem because I have to spend a specific number of hours training for each part of the job. and going up to ring up customers doesn't count as part of the training time. I point this out to the manager on duty, and he tells me if you're called to the front to ring out customers, then you drop whatever you're doing and go up front to ring out customers. When I told the woman training me that he'd said that, she told me, okay, we'll play by his rules then. She started documenting my training time to the second. Surprise, surprise, by the end of my shift that day, I was nearly an hour short of the training time I needed. Meaning I failed that day of training and had to redo it all again the next day I came in. And because of how close the maternity leave was, that meant both me and my trainer had to come in on an off day that week, earning 8 hours of overtime pay each in the process to redo that day's training. Today I got called in by the store supervisor, one step above the boss who told me to go ring out customers, to ask why this had happened. I just told him, well, boss told me to go ring out customers, and since the boss couldn't deny that, my trainer backed me up on it, they had to pay both me and my trainer that overtime pay and couldn't write us up over it. Both boss and supervisor also got chewed out over it by the regional supervisor, and I'm sure some changes to the go up front to ring out customers policy will be seeing some changes soon. Pretty sure this is standard effery in retail. Drop your work to help customers, get yelled at for not completing work on time.
My parents live in a nice, quiet neighborhood. For the most part, everyone gets along well, and the neighborhood exists in its own little bubble. The only time you see people from outside the neighborhood bubble is on Halloween. Our backyard neighbor, a single middle-aged woman who we'll call Sally, was kind of adopted by our family and came to all holiday parties and family get-togethers. We all love her, and that made our revenge all the more satisfying. Sally had a next-door neighbor who owned a lot between Sally's house and her own. When the neighbor expressed an interest in selling the lot, Sally offered to purchase it, and the deal was made. Unfortunately, Sally's neighbor died prior to the land being finalized, and the lot went into her assets to be distributed to only her daughter, who we'll call Resting B-Face, or RBF. RBF disliked Sally and refused to sell the empty lot to her because she believed Sally had been attempting to screw her mother over. RBF claimed she was going to sell it to an interested developer who would build a house there. When my parents heard this, they were upset. Our house was on a hill, and the empty lot also ran up to our backyard. My parents didn't want to look down onto another house/backyard. Likewise, Sally didn't want a house next to her, so she tried one last time to purchase the lot. She offered more than she had originally planned on paying, but RBF said she would never sell the lot to her. My parents and Sally hatched a plan, though. My parents, whom RBF did not know, had an attorney draft a purchase offer for the empty lot. They offered several $1,000s less than Sally's original offer had been. RBF hemmed and hawed, but came back with a counteroffer equivalent to Sally's original offer. My parents offered her $5,000 less, and she accepted. After the sale was finalized, my parents sold the lot to Sally for the same price they'd purchased it. Sally ended up receiving the lot for $5,000 less than she had originally agreed to pay, and over $10,000 less than what she offered to RBF. RBF did find out what happened and tried to negate the contract with my parents on account of fraud, but that's obviously not a legitimate claim. RBF never spoke to Sally or my parents after she learned what happened. Another interesting tidbit: after purchasing the lot, my parents notified the town of their intent to not develop the property, so no one can ever build a single-family dwelling on it. Killed two birds with one stone. No downhill neighbor, and the property stays in the family. I love it when greed and spitefulness come back to bite folks in the butt. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.